Are women asking for divorce now more so than men are?
Yes, women are more likely to precipitate divorce than men. About 2 to 1, I think.
Wow. I mean, that's an indication of something. It's an indication of a healthy freedom.
Yeah, exit power. I mean, that's what an economist would call it, right? And that's a massive sign of success.
One of the issues I have with the modern day discourse that's being had in pop culture about the downturn in marriage and relationships is that much of it seems to be centered around the fact that men need to put more effort into being more attractive. And I will admit that that certainly is part of it. Men certainly should put a considerable amount of effort into being attractive if that's what they want. But it also at times seems that this conversation seems a bit outdated, or dare I say even misguided, because they're speaking from a point of view, a reference point that simply is not available to a growing number of more people. If you aren't seeing the kinds of outcomes that these people are used to seeing and they see as normal, then their conversation almost seems alien to you. And this kind of video is a good example of this kind of alien speak.
If the husband dies, the wife is going to be fine.
Really?
Yeah. Widows are way happier than widowers. I told that to my wife and she's like, huh. Widowers do really poorly, generally. Men do very poorly. And part of the reason is because 60% of 60-year-old men say their best friend is their wife. 30% of their wives say their best friend is their husband. Women have more relationships. They have closer, deeper love relationships with non-related kin and with the adult children typically than the husband does. The husband's most intense companionate relationship typically is with the wife.
To me, this kind of talk harkens of a day where people went to sock hops and they married their high school crush and they stayed married for 40 or 50 years and their wife became their best friend. But in an age where the average marriage is lasting less than a decade, the idea that your wife passing away and you're going to be alone by yourself sad is not something that most men can really identify with if they're under 60. So this kind of talk makes it seem like, well, guys need to do X, Y, and Z to be better. But if we're in a fundamentally different environment, then it's just nostalgia. Richard Reeves is going to do the same thing in his video, and it harkens back to the same ideal.
Women can leave relationships.
Are women asking for divorce now more so than men are?
Yes, women are more likely to precipitate divorce than men. About 2 to 1, I think.
Wow. I mean, that's an indication of something. It's an indication of a healthy freedom.
Yeah, exit power. I mean, that's what an economist would call it, right? And that's a massive sign of success, that women can leave relationships in a way that they couldn't before because they were trapped economically. And so this kind of economic trap that was marriage, which the women's movement really took aim at and just said this institution of marriage is basically a way to trap and oppress women in relationships of economic dependency, where she'll be powerless because he has the money, right? That feminist critique of traditional marriage was profound and correct, and the results have been extraordinary in unbundling that and giving women economic power.
The comment says, I wish men would understand that emotional intelligence is so important because of how much clarity/security it would bring to your lives. Y'all think be talking in y'all ear just to be talking. We don't. Y'all think bitch want to argue with y'all because y'all refuse to expand your emotional vocabulary. We don't. It's to provide clarity for both us and y'all dusty bitches. Let me stop.
Now that we're in the era of exit power and young ladies have been freed from the kind of economic bondage that he spoke of as being part of marriage in previous times, we are kind of in an era now where leaving a marriage is not a big deal anymore. And even someone like Mia Khalifa says marriage is not a sanctimonious thing, it's just paperwork. And so what is it that actually gets taken away when you're in an era where leaving marriage doesn't become a big deal anymore? And the young lady that would have been married younger and had someone care about her not have that anymore.
It used to be where men provided financially or with schmeat and can make their own self and we can pay for our own shit. So I'm gonna need y'all to catch up on the emotional part. A common misconception about me as a clinician is that 90% of my clientele have been men, Black men specifically. And what we specifically work on is expanding their emotional vocabulary because a lot of y'all don't even have the words to express how you're feeling.
The snippets you're watching are from a TikTok that I believe led to the firing of Shabri Rawls. But what I find interesting is that some of what she's saying actually mirrors what you're hearing from Richard Reeves, that young ladies now have their own earning capacity. They can do what they want, and so they're raising their standards, as she continues to explain.
Y'all told to elevate our standards. And at the cost of us elevating y'all standards, y'all got axed because y'all didn't elevate either. We're not tolerating emotional neglect. Step it up. Go talk to somebody. Go expand your emotional vocabulary so your life can be better. All right. Go in peace.
Without economic power, women don't have choice about marriage. So now we've got this massive rise in women's choice as to whether to marry, who to marry, whether to have kids, who to have kids with, etc. And so you've seen this massive expansion of women's choice and power, which is magnificent and destabilizing, especially for men.
I feel like men truly are scared of women in this generation. So I want to talk about why men of this generation are scared of women. And I think it has to do with a bunch of reasons, and I'm going to go into it. But number one, dating apps has made it so that men do not have to risk anything to go on a date with women.
In this age of quote-unquote exit power, what we've noticed, especially people of my generation, is that a growing number of young ladies have taken this opportunity to just be more physically available, at least in front of a camera. And so you start seeing TikToks like this that are just emblematic of a shift in, instead of sharing this kind of femininity with one guy, I'm going to monetize it. I'm going to take the gifts that I have the freedom to do what I want now, and I'm just going to use that freedom to be part of my money-making ventures. And in this kind of era, many of the old types of advice just don't apply because, simply put, if it's not special to make that connection with a young lady like you would have done in high school years ago, then maybe love is not that special, or better yet, maybe it doesn't even exist anymore.
I posted a video on Monday telling men that their dusty behavior is only harming them and that they would benefit from emotional intelligence, and I should by Friday didn't have employment.
So now we've got this massive rise in women's choice.
I need a new start or whatever, so I'm about to just start posting over here.
As to whether to marry, who to marry.
I got some thoughts on my brain already, and I just want to share them with y'all.
Whether to have kids, who to have kids with, etc. And so you've seen this massive expansion of women's choice and power.
Okay, so I am naturally by default a loner, but I acknowledge fully and deeply that I need to touch people.
Both of those things can be true at once. It can be creating these unintended destabilizing consequences for men.
But touching people gives me anxiety.
And if we then add to that a danger sometimes to either mock men or masculinity, almost pathologize them in humor.
Y'all think just want to argue with y'all because y'all refuse to expand your emotional vocabulary. We don't. It's to provide clarity for both us and y'all dusty bitch.
But sometimes maybe not so much in humor as well. I think that just doubles down on this sense. It's like, not only are you not needed, but maybe you're actually a bit toxic. Of all the moments to not be really kind of making sure that men feel really bad about themselves, this is not that moment.
When Richard Reeves speaks of the exit power that young ladies have, it basically means that either they have the financial ability to never enter the relationship in the first place, or they could leave when they are not being fulfilled. But he doesn't fill in the other side of the whole, which is, what is it that's in a marriage that a man gives to a woman, especially if he is with her in her early years and they go through some difficulties together and develop a bond? What does it cost a young lady if she never has that? That is something that cannot be measured in money. And if you look at the time that has passed between the date that her first video went viral and now, it's been about 2 years. And you can see that there is something profoundly missing from her life, and she's struggling to deal with it. It is not my intention making this video to make light of her situation or to poke fun at her, but in a way that I detail further, which I would not dare detail in this particular video to some of my members, she is in a pretty difficult state. And she has the freedom that Richard Reeves was speaking about, but here she needs the emotional support. And you could see with the paltry amount of engagement she gets with this video when everyone was not on her side like they were when she was really famous. Now she's kind of going through this emotional struggle on her own. Gone are the days for her where she could have a TikTok that would get 650,000 views. Instead, now her latest view gets 109 likes and 13 comments, one of them being thoughts on professional cuddlers. We used to have professional cuddlers before young ladies had their quote unquote exit power. They were called loving husbands. Have husbands been perfect? No, of course not. But if your husband cared, that would be the last question you'd have to ponder when you want physical touch, as she clearly is longing for now.
Okay, so I am like naturally, like by default, a loner. But I acknowledge fully and deeply that I need to touch people. But touching people gives me anxiety. But not touching people makes me depressed. But touching people who I'm not supposed to be touching gives me depression and anxiety. So what the f*** am I supposed to do? I am a hugger, but I'm also a loner. So like, leave me alone, but give me a hug. But don't talk to me, but stop bothering me. But like, talk to me unconditionally.
To me, the ultimate tragedy in this is that seeing her go from just 2 years ago, the self-assured therapist that had her very unique way of telling black men to seek therapy, to now a young lady who is not only selling compromised pictures and images of herself on the internet, but she's yearning for that closeness that would come from a husband. The husband that we've heard time and time again is oppressive and that they now have the exit power to get away from. Well, the hookup culture doesn't give her what she's seeking. That only comes from a loving husband that has been through the ups and downs with her from the beginning. But in a culture now that is basically saying young ladies don't want / need that anymore, what happens when you are on the downslope of your physical prowess, if you will, your beauty, and now it's your character or who you are? You want someone to compliment you as you come home from a tough day of work and be there for you. Who's the guy that's going to be there for you? Not the guy that you just met that you demanded from because he doesn't know you. It's going to be the guy that loved you through all of the ups and downs from the beginning, from the early 20s onward. And now that we've told a generation, maybe 2 or 3 generations of young ladies, they're not going to have that because they spent their first decade or so on the dating market being free. What of the rest of their lives? That's the part that feminism and all of this messaging is not telling these young ladies. And to me, it's a tragedy because guys can simply say, I want the young lady that I want, and I'll just go date younger and I'll date her. But all of the people that told all of the lies to these young ladies about how they're going to find happiness, and when they get to 40 and realize it's not there, they're left with an empty bag and trying to figure out how to deal with all of those emotions that they're carrying by themselves, with 109 views and 13 comments. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, guys.